I think there's some real critical challenges that need to be addressed as we move from this linear model of creating things and then digging them holes into the ground and putting them in them towards a circular economy. One of the real major things that we need to work on is a systems approach, which we hear quite frequently. It's about people trying to solve a whole problem. But I think one of the greatest challenges we have is coming away from studying the problem through academia and turning it into real action. Often there are solutions out there that need to be scaled and adopted, and they need to be driven by regulation. That's what we've seen so far. Businesses understand this is coming, they know this has to happen, but they are waiting to be told to do it. So I think one of the challenges we have to face is our legal system needs to represent what's happening in the world. This is a pollution source in any way that we look at it, but also this is becoming, particularly with microplastic, it's in our food, it's in our air, and it's in our water. You can't get away from it, and that's not fair for the future generations to inherit this challenge. I think one of the things for us that's really important as a business is how we try to help other small, medium enterprise, SMEs, businesses. I'm really keen to show that there's some really simple things that you can do in your company to have a big impact. So we're running a number of different bits internally, which we refer to as metrics. So we treat our financial parts of the business and our sustainability sections of the business in the same light. And we've developed a metrics dashboard, which looks at our impact, so positive impact in the world versus our footprint. We compare the two. And I think that we're in a process of rolling that out to other businesses because it's a really simple change you can do. There's some key takeaways that can be really quick. Running a business is hard enough anyway. Adding extra layers of circular economy and sustainability might feel like a barrier, but when it goes well, it will improve your employee retention. It will improve the way that people think about you. It will also move you into a space where you can practice different parts and access some different things of grants and other parts as well. So there are some financial benefits of doing it as well, let alone what you do for your customers and also the future generations to come.
In terms of critical changes that the world needs to see to adopt a circular economy, I think it really comes down to strong government policy. The work of organisations like WRAP and DEFRA is really key to ensuring that the circular economy is something that is the norm. The advice I'd give to other businesses is that we all need to work together, as this is about the economy as a whole and not just individual businesses. The more people we can get on board, the better it's going to be for the planet.
Yeah, adoption of the circular economy, that's really tricky. What excites us a little bit, I suppose, is that just as we found a body of waste that was not really being commercialised particularly well, we're seeing lots of individual entrepreneurs taking on a particular stream of waste and really figuring out what to do with that and creating little businesses out of that will grow over time, no question. So in a way, there's no real barriers to getting out there and finding an opportunity. And if the waste material comes to you inexpensively enough, the economics are pretty good actually. So that should encourage entrepreneurs to find those sorts of opportunities. However, there's still a whole raft of things that could make life easier for us. Things like easier fundraising, that would be great. I must take my hat off to the UK government. The landfill tax has been very helpful for us because that means if you're a company who's throwing something away, it's actually more expensive to throw it away than to give it away. So in our instances, that leads to sort of weekly phone calls of, hey, Ripe, we've just looked into throwing all our furniture to landfill. We've got 2 weeks before we have to be out of the office. It's going to be really expensive. If you back the van up, you can take whatever you like from that. And that's a great opportunity for us. And that wouldn't have happened unless the landfill tax had really ramped up over time. So a good bit of policy. So let's give credit to where it's due. When thinking about circular economy business models, I don't know. I mean, we've had a good run and we got lucky in our market timing. What we always found is that there's two ways to think about a circular model. One is that sort of big corporate approach where you do everything in a regular way that's consistent with the linear economy. So I'll give you an example. So if you're thinking about recycling coffee machines, for instance, and you call up TNT and say, hey, how much would it cost to get a coffee machine back from anywhere in the world? What's TNT going to say? They're going to say, okay, let's assume it's Alaska, worst case scenario. So that's an enormous cost, multiplied by number of coffee machines, and the economics just blow out really quickly. What we've found is that actually taking a really local approach to say, how can we improve those economics drastically, not just a little bit, but drastically, by staying hyper-local, for instance, and setting up very local facilities where we can almost personally collect all the materials from the local area. How can we reduce our costs by using labour that isn't as expensive as, for instance, modern lorry drivers who are charging very large amounts these days in terms of salaries? How can we find better ways of doing things? So I suppose the key thing that helped us a lot was just innovation. How can we change things to find better ways of doing things that are incredibly sensible, but also have social and environmental benefits, almost as a side effect sometimes?
Well, I think there needs to be legislation around planned obsolescence. This is a real passion of mine. What we've seen is that, for example, kitchen appliances have they're breaking at double the rate that they used to in 2004, and companies are allowed to get away with this, and they're training consumers to accept it. So now if your toaster breaks within a couple of years, people just go, oh, well, I'll just buy another one. But I think legislation about the minimum amount of time that a product should last would be really excellent. Well, I think part of the circular economy is actually collaboration with lots of other companies. I think no man's an island. I think when you very first come up with a business idea, and I was very much like this, you want to keep it a secret. You're like, what if someone steals my business idea? And actually the reality is that everyone's far too busy with their own lives to steal your business idea. I think, collaboration is key. Talk to as many people as you can. Find out where the people are that are working in this group. The Circular Economy Clubs are a wonderful place to meet other people. And so take advantage of meeting all those people, and there's so much to learn if you find that right person who might have the answer to something that you're looking for.
I think there are a number of changes required for greater adoption of the circular economy. One of them is kind of a re-examination of our standards and regulations and ensuring that they're more dynamic. Another area will be looking at policies, especially waste management policies. They're not quite as clear-cut as they need to be in certain areas within the circular economy. And the final thing is, I guess, just more adoption and more open-mindedness from the construction industry, that natural materials can outperform synthetic alternatives. We're proving that against standards, and we're able to recirculate waste and improve the value of that resource infinitely. So I think it's just a perception change, which is happening in an amazing way and in ways that we've never seen before. I think a lot of the conversations we have today would have been laughable 5 years ago, and now we're being taken in a much more serious manner in the industry. So I think perception change has been really incredible, but it could still, I think, go a bit further. I would say when looking to develop or build a circular business, I think one of the critical things is to really hone in on the systems and the business model and the relationships between all the different stakeholders before you kind of jump into things. And the reason I say that is because you can find there are some incredible shortcuts and leaps that can be achieved through collaborating and through working with other stakeholders. And that's because the circular economy is impossible to deliver and work within without collaboration. So I think have a kind of collaborative spirit and make sure that you spend a lot of time developing the business model, ensuring that there aren't any outputs that aren't considered. Every output becomes an input for another system, financially, environmentally, and socially as well.
To support the adoption of the circular economy, in my opinion, there are two really key changes that are needed. The first is that the cost of raw ingredients or raw materials is the true cost, and it includes the environmental cost. So, for example, from a food perspective, farmers must be paid a fair price for the food that they're producing, which will increase the cost of food, and that means that there are lots of economic system changes we need to make through redistribution of wealth, etc., to ensure that everybody can afford to pay the true cost of food. The other is that we need much more information about where waste is occurring. From a food perspective, we need mandatory reporting of food waste, so that organisations that are responsible for waste are incentivised and have that information to manage it down. But also entrepreneurs can have access to that data to inspire innovation. For other small and medium-sized businesses that are looking to adopt circular models, my advice would be to first look at your own waste streams, look at what those materials or ingredients are and how you can use those either yourself or in partnership with others. And then look at your ingredients, the inputs into your own business processes, and whether you can source ingredients and materials that are coming from sources that would otherwise have been wasted.
I think there's two critical changes that will support adoption of the circular economy. The first of those, very specific to tech, is changing the way that things are made. I've already mentioned about the fact that so many items are made not to be repaired. They have a single life. If they become damaged, that is kind of just assumed that that item has reached the end of its life. We need to change so there's a more standardization around, for example, the screws that are used and the fixings that are used within devices to make it easier for refurbishers such as ourselves to carry out that process. And also just a general consideration for repair in there. Items like printers, for example, are sold so cheap now, and all of the components, you can't buy spare components for them. And if you try and take one apart, a lot of them are put together with fixings that use adhesives that you break that's gone, that's done. It cannot be reassembled. So that's one of the big things. The other thing that I think needs to change for the circular economy, and we've seen especially in our operations, is that a lot of circular business models are quite labour intensive. So where a traditional electrics recycler might shred up all of the items that they have, we are testing them to see if they can be reused, and if they can't, then doing the disassembly process by hand. We get much better value out of the materials that are in there, and we don't mean financial value, we mean value for those resources. But it takes a lot of time and a lot of labour to do that. So finding ways to support sort of labour over resource intensive processes, because ultimately we're creating jobs, would be something that I think needs to change. I think the main piece of advice I'd give to SMEs trying to adopt circular business models would be to learn from others that are already doing it. I think it's so important to try and take value, and you'll find that most people who are working in the circular economy are keen to share their experiences. We, for example, have had conversations today with people who've said, we wanted to look at potentially doing something similar, but we realise how much time and effort you have invested into learning how this works and what needs to be done, that actually we'd love to work with you on doing that. And I think that's really important, because otherwise it's just a waste of money. We know there are a lot of sort of funds being made available for people to investigate the circular economy. But if some of the work has already been done, let's learn from each other, build upon that, and put those resources to as best use as possible.
The biggest challenge is it'll take a lot of time for people to understand what circular economy is. There's a huge population who does not know about it, and it'll take time to get in front of that. From the government side, we should be getting the benefits of doing more for the planet, because it does help in the long run. Right now, in our business, in our product, we are putting the textiles out of landfill. There are products that are there. And that's not a landfill, it's a piece of land where they can build hospitals or school, or they can build anything, right? That will generate more value for the economy. So we are, with that fashion benefit, with approaching with the circular economy model from the whole circle, we are saving a lot for the government, but we are not getting the benefit of it right now. That thing should be addressed for us, that I think, yeah. I mean, I'd say really understand what circular economy is. It's very detailed, it's very in-depth, and see what works for you, see what you can do with your skills. Collaborate as much as you can with as many people as you can. Be open to learning. It's a new field. It's the education bit is not out there. That's the best thing that you can do for yourself and what you want to do with the business. Know why you're doing it, why you're it's not a fancy term, it's a big responsibility for our future generation. So the most important advice I'll give to other small, medium enterprises or people who want to get into this is collaborate, learn, and go for it.
For me, after being in this, circular textile business now for over 10 years, I would say that we're crying out for legislation. One of the things that we've noticed now is more and more companies and big brands are using to recycled materials. But that's just not enough, and that has been driven by legislation. But that's just not enough. So they need to be forced to adopt the other aspects of the circular economy, the most important being less production and making garments that are valuable, that people will hold on to. So adopting the less is more, focusing on quality and durability, because that's the most important environmental impact that we can make, and that has to be driven by legislation. For other SMEs that are thinking about adopting circular economy practice, I would say just go for it. There are small changes that you can make, whether it's in your materials or your operations, and there's so much advice and help out there right now. The circular economy is really the future of manufacturing and practice, business practice. So there's huge opportunities in the circular economy.
I think ways of making a circular economy more adopted throughout the world would be by changing the conscious shift in people's minds and their attitude towards consuming products. This would benefit everyone, because the part of the problem we have in this world is the consumerism increases the demand, and it also increases the speed at which things need to be made. If I could share any advice with other small businesses looking to adopt a circular economy, I would say find your industry and really focus in on what makes your circular economy so good, and make sure you spread the word and reach out to other people that you can collaborate with, ask for advice. I think everyone within the circular economy with these kind of values really wants to help each other, and it's not just about their business doing well, but a circular economy goes from being within a business to actually the world working as a circular economy. And I think you find that everyone has that same mindset, so reach out for help to these other people and businesses, and persevere on the products that you have, and eventually these things will come through. It's the future of how things are going to go. Regardless, we know the governments are always very slow at implementing legislations, but they are going that way. So it is inevitable a circular economy will come round. So if you can stick to your idea, it will eventually flower and blossom.
We need to collaborate in a stronger, focused way, not just obviously creating awareness, which is very important, but actioning that awareness, implementation. And the only way that can happen is by collaborating together. My advice to other businesses would be, whether they are already circular or they don't know but they want to know because they're starting to acknowledge that the system or the new economy is towards that direction, is that they start today. Start today to embrace, to get knowledge of what you're doing wrong, what you're doing right, and what you are in the middle, so you can improve all of that in between. Because if you don't improve and you work towards the new economy, you will be left behind, and if you are left behind, there is no business. There will be another business that will supplement the exercise of the businesses that are happening at the moment, like we are doing in our sector. But we all need to cooperate and believe that we can create a better economy whilst we create a more sustainable living environment.
In my opinion, in terms of the critical changes we need to make, one and I think it's going to be one that's mentioned a lot, is around infrastructure. We do need to have an improved infrastructure in terms of collection, processing, and then at the end of line with the end of it gets to the end of a life of a product. At the moment, we're having to take that on ourselves, which I think is a good thing. I think there's producer responsibility where actually, if you put a product onto the market, you need to take that back, and I think that's useful. But you need the infrastructure to help you and enable you to do that in a cost-effective way. The other aspect, just quickly, is around what we term real-world recycling. I think one of the blockers is there are a lot of companies out there who want to be circular and believe they're designing a circular product, but they don't understand the real complexities or the reality of where recycling is within each country. So very often, I think a lot of greenwashing comes from just naivety. It's critical that businesses, any design agency, any design company, understands what's achievable in the real world, and there's a massive lack of that at the moment. The advice I'd give, anyone who runs a business, no matter what size it is, a successful business is one that can preempt where the market's going to go and be there at the forefront of it. That's primarily what you have to do as a business. And I cannot stress enough how in the next 5 to 10 years the circular economy is going to boom. It's going to be driven by legislation, so it's coming. So I really do feel strongly that in 5 to 10 years' time there'll be those companies that saw it coming, adapted, and wholeheartedly took it on, and then those that are just going to be left behind. So overall, as a big umbrella, I just urge everybody, any business has to be moving in this direction. If you're not, you need to urgently.
So today we talked a lot about what needs to change in the industry as a whole, the circular economy, kind of like companies, but also kind of like regulations. So what needs to change is definitely more support from governments and big industry stakeholders. And also we need more collaboration across different sectors to understand how somebody else's waste can be a company's gold. And these are all the connections that haven't been mapped out yet, or very few have been. And so that's why there's a lot of resources that are going to waste and not being reutilized. In order to adopt this business model, companies are going to have a lot of integrity and transparency with their customers and supply chain. So it would be really great if all of us could agree on what we want this to look like in terms of policy, and also in terms of how much of our process we show and we share as well, because knowledge in the circular economy is as valuable as, raw materials.
The critical changes that we need to adopt to support a circular economy are really, we need use cases and leaders of those use cases taken forward. We need to see communities going forward. We need to see the early adopters showing the success, demonstrating success, so other people will follow. They'll follow in their footsteps, and communities will follow, and also policies will also follow. It's a no-brainer. Once it starts happening, and once it starts happening en masse, and it already is starting to mass, world attention has gone towards net zero, and also towards the negative effects of pollution and waste on our health and well-being. There already is a mass change towards circular economy. The advice I'd give to a smaller business wanting to adopt a circular economy model is, for a start, make sure you really believe in it. You need to do your research so you really believe in what you're doing. Once you believe in it, you'll have conviction to go and go boldly. Once you do that, find the people who will value you and the organisations who will value what you do. Ignore the ones that don't. Build that community around you. Build that tribe or that pod around you so you can swim and you can run together. And that way you'll get to success.
In order for us to transition to a circular economy, I think the first thing that has to happen is that we have to remove our ego, and we have to stop thinking of human beings as being above everything else. We have to see ourselves as part of a natural system in symbiosis with everything else, all of the other creatures, the entire planet, everything. And if we can successfully do that, and I'm not saying we can, then we've got a real shot at it. Because if your goal is just to maximize what you can do for your community and what you can do for the people around you, and you realize that there's so much joy associated with that, then we will have this wonderful world that we can live in. And not just a circular economy, we'll also have, peace and less inequality and better education all around, and it will be good for everything, but the ego has to go. I think that for us, the real success came from starting with a problem. So we didn't decide to become business people. We didn't just decide to create a widget that may or may not have been necessary. If you start falling in love with the problems that surround you, and then you think, right, how can a circular economy solve that problem? How can a circular economy mindset solve that problem? And then you think, who do I need to help me on that mission? What skills don't I have? What partners am I going to need? And if you can start mapping all of that out, you won't need to write a business plan. That will be your business plan. And I think that's genuinely the advice that we do give to people. But also, be stubborn, have fun.